Good evening, folks. Welcome to the first of many Dualistic master classes. And that is relatively a joke because I always find master class just a funny term that people use to describe a course. But anyways, I wanted to go over some Figma basics, and the idea of this is just to teach you some of the mechanical skills or just some of the things you just will be touching with Figma that could finish basically 90% of the jobs out there. This is kind of what I do from day to day. These are the tools, the shortcuts, the concepts, and what I do with this tool if I ever had to do design. And so once you finish this video, you have everything it takes to go grab a job or a client and start working. Or you can just say that you know how to use Figma and put that on your resume. So, as an introduction, like I said, this is basically going to show you like 90% of the things I do or I use in this tool. Be aware that there are faster and more efficient ways to do some of the techniques I'm going to show. If you're already a designer and already know how to use Figma, you probably won't even watch this, but kudos to you. You already know how to do it better. This is mainly just for people that are curious how to work a Figma tool or a design tool in general. And it's always fun to have a scenario like what if you didn't have Figma, or you got stranded on an island and all they had was like Adobe Photoshop 7. Well, ideally you would have a tool that can make rectangles, and then you could still be the same designer as you were if you had the latest tool or the latest Figma update. So I'm gonna start on the left here. I'm gonna put this Figma file as some type of download in the description. So it's going to be in the description as well on my Patreon page for those that want to sign up for all the updates and details of that. I'll talk about later. So one of the first skills to learn in any type of design tooling is the concept of like navigating around. And in any given file, there's probably going to be a bunch of screens, and in Figma they call them frames. But they're basically pages, they're screens, they're different ideas or mood boards or different boards in general. And at any given point, you have a lot of them. You might have a couple of screens here, a couple here. You're titling certain things. Ideally organizing them in a way that makes sense to you. And the best way to navigate between these is learning how to panning. So panning is by holding spacebar, and then you'll see this hand that comes up in the canvas while still holding space, and then just do a simple left click and grab. So like just pretend you're manually pinching this rug and moving from place to place. So learning how to do that fast and try to find where you are is going to help a lot, as well as learning how to zoom in and out. I'm using Control and the scroll wheel on Windows. On Macs, you can probably do Command, or maybe Control as well. It's probably Control. But I think on Macs you could also just use, pinch zoom, or I think Magic Mouse you just naturally can scroll, but I'm not sure. And kind of like the exercise I have here is, just, hey, look at this screen. Let me copy this square and go to this frame, because maybe you are testing out certain ideas and you like, oh, I like this block here. I want to see how it looks over here. Copy, paste. Copy and pasting is another thing you would want to learn how to do efficiently. And that's not just to be funny about, it's just learn how to control C. Control C and control V, and you'll be in a good spot. So that's enough about panning. That's how you do it. Learn it. Next thing is rectangle tool. The best way to do this is press R. R is the shortcut key for rectangle. Or if you're using the newer Figma UI, it's on the bottom here. I believe the older UI has it on the top, but just remember R is for rectangle. And once you do have the tool selected, you can just draw a rectangle wherever you want. Figma does a cool thing where it shows you how big the rectangle is in terms of width and height. So if you're looking for specific height, you can look for that, or use your guidelines to ultimately draw the rectangle you want. So if I wanted this to be full length, I could first create the rectangle, and then if you hover to the left side, or if you hover to any of the sides, you'll see these two arrows that are pointing in opposite directions. So left and right means you could move the rectangle horizontally, and up and down you can move the rectangle vertically. And then if you see diagonal arrows, then that means you can move both directions. Now, while you have the rectangle open and drawn, you can also hold shift while drawing the rectangle, and it will automatically make it a square. Pretty useful. And then finally, there's this little thing where if you hover over the edge, just slightly off the edge, you'll see little curved arrows, and that just allows you to rotate your shape. Now, not the most useful in basic designing, but just wanted to show you there. And the other thing with rectangles is you'll see these little 4 dots on the corners, and that is your way of changing the radius of the rectangle. So technically, you can make a rectangle into a circle, or just make a little rounded rectangle. So that's why I always recommend learning the rectangle tool, how to manipulate it, creating fast things with rectangle, because it is the building block of life. Building block of any website design or whatever you're doing. That's enough for rectangles. I think you guys know the gist of it. Now, the other thing to learn about rectangles, or just not rectangles, but Figma in general, or any design program, is they'll probably have some way to group items together. And that just basically makes things easier to manipulate in terms of moving a collection of things together. So you can see I have these three blocks here, and if I wanted to move it below this line, of course I can select all of it and then move it below, or I can move them one by one. But ideally, if you know these 3 things are always going to be related, they're always going to be stuck together, you want to select all 3 and then press Ctrl G to group them together. And now I can just drag the whole thing below the line. Another cool thing they did with groups is they make these little pink controls easier to see and to manage while you're like hovering over the group. So I thought that was always cool. And basically you could use it to rearrange objects within the group or selection. So that's enough for groups. Always group relevant things together. It'll just make your life easier. Now, the other part of grouping is auto layout. I'm not going to go too much into it. I just want to explain that it is a thing. And let's say I have these 3 separate rectangles. And if I selected all of them, to initiate an auto layout, you just press Shift and A. And then you'll see it does a lot of things for you. So I'm going to undo that and I'm going to show again. I'm going to select 3 rectangles, Shift A. Again, there is some interface button. I just don't know where that is. Probably on the right somewhere, but Shift A, auto layout A is the shortcut key for that, and that's all I know. Now, once you see auto layout, you'll see a lot of things. Once you've auto layout a selection, you'll notice there's a lot of things that's happening. And then on the right, you can see there's a few controls. The most important thing is probably the gap. And this will just determine how much gap there is between each object. The padding, you can kind of see the box. This just determines how much padding there is horizontally, and then how much padding you want vertically. So why is that important? Well, mainly for websites and apps, there's a certain type of padding just to like space things away from other elements. The other thing is, now that I have padding, I can now have control of how these items are laid out within this auto layout group. So right now I have it centered and to the left, but if I want it to be aligned top left, oops, I need to extend it here. So yeah, so now I see it's in the top left. Let me reduce the padding so it makes more sense. Top left, if I did the center, it's in the center. If I did bottom center, it's bottom. If I did it to right, moves to right. So you can see, you can play that around. To position it where you want it to be. Now there's definitely a lot more to it, but I just wanted to show you that it is a thing, and to do it, you just select your items and then Shift A. So if I were to do another 3 rectangles by pressing R, choose these 3, Shift A. Now you see it's like kind of weird because it kind of assumes what you're trying to do with your layout, but I want these all to be on the same row. And so you would just choose horizontal layout here. And now they're all in the same row. But if I want it vertically, I press the vertical and then it is vertical. So you can see how this is very useful in doing future responsive designs, or if you had a group of things and you just want to see, oh, what does it look like horizontal or vertical? And you don't have to like manually go in here to move the squares around. But that's enough of auto layouts. Feel free to look at Figma's actual, I think I learned of auto layout from Figma's actual video tutorial on it. All right, next thing is pixel pushing. And this is, honestly, I probably should have talked about this earlier because this is one of the most important things to learn in terms of design, is knowing where your element is compared to other elements. In this case, rectangles. So if I select here and hold Alt, I'm going to see a bunch of things going on. And mainly these red guidelines, it shows where this element is in terms of spacing or position from the edges of your website, your frame, or whatever container you have this in. And you can see this box is 40 away from the edge of to the left. It's 40 away from the edge on top. 920 pixels away from the right edge, and so forth. Now, if I hold Alt and hover over other elements, I can see its relative distance from those elements. And so when it comes to pixel pushing, it's a lot of like being exactly where you want to be. And so using the red guidelines will help a lot because it helps you at least match, this rectangle. Like if I was off center here, then it's nowhere close, right? But if I move a little bit and I see all these three nice little red lines, it means that this rectangle and that rectangle are perfectly in line with each other. And then if I hold Alt and hover over, I can see it's 60 pixels. But if I want it to be 40, I can hold Shift and press up twice, because Shift and any arrow key will move an element by 10 pixels. And this is the default setting. You can actually change it to whatever you want. But if I just use the arrow keys by itself, it moves it by 1. And then you can see how I have awkward spacing. So moving things around like that is very simple. Use your arrow keys, use the shift and arrow keys, use your red guidelines. The coolest thing about Figma is it kind of always assumes things will be spaced out evenly. And so now with this rectangle, if I hover, find some red guidelines, it like instantly knows that, I want it to be 40. See, there's no reference of what spacing I want between left and right, so I need to make it 40 myself. And then now I have some red guidelines to put them all together. Once you learn how to do auto layouts, this will become much easier process to do. But in instances where you can't use an auto layout, then use your arrow keys, use your guidelines. It's going to help a lot. All right, next step is aligning tools. So when you select an object, you'll see on the right for position, there's all these different aligning tools, and they all work in pretty self-explanatory ways. So this one's align left. It aligns left to the container, or if I want it centered, or if I want it top, bottom, whatever I want. So if you have something selected and then use the positioning tools, it always position it based on the overall container it's in. So in this instance, I have this frame, this white frame, so that's why it's aligning to those. Now, if you have something else selected, two things selected, now it's going to align to each other. So if I did center, you can see this box square is perfectly centered aligned with the rectangle. And if I did these three items, I did center, now all 3 items are perfectly centered. Then you can do it on the other side. Or, let's say I wanted everything to be pushed to the left. So very useful. Learn the aligning tools. Because sometimes when you try to rely on the red guidelines, it may not seem correct at times. And so you want to select both, use the center, and then you can double check your positioning. So aligning, very important. I use it all the time. All right, now number 6 is actually something I don't use often in terms of daily use, but I will use this when I get into the nitty gritty of designing and when you want to kind of scale things to another point. And that's the idea of components. Components is basically an asset you can create that is repeatable. So I have these buttons and they have this special purple border, and that just means that if I were to change this, because on the left you'll see that it's really tough to tell, but it's this component symbol, and the instant symbol is just a blank square and a blank diamond, I guess. And then the component is like a diamond with it's 4 squares rotated, but it has something in it. So basically it's filled or not filled. So this is my main component, and these are just copycats. And the idea here is, every website has a button. And let's actually create this component just so you know how to do it. So I'm gonna create button text. And what I'm gonna do is actually create a layout, auto layout of this text by Shift A. Now it's a frame. So it gave some like default values, but what we're gonna do is for the gap between objects, it's 0 because there is no other objects in this button. And then padding, we can do 20 horizontal padding and 12 vertical padding, and then give it a fill. So this is your button's background color. We could make it red, and we can give it a stroke, as well as let's give it 12 pixel radius, border radius. So now this is just a regular auto layout text that looks like a button. Now, in order to turn it into a button, I usually just right click, and there is create component option here. Of course, the shortcut is Control-Alt-K, but for me, I just right click, make it easy for myself. And then that's just my component. Now I could name it something else, so I can say red button component. Now this is my main component. And so the idea here, and I'll show an example, is I have this library of components I could use, and I can quickly drag them out and use them on any other different page. And what makes the magic here works is that if, let's say, down the line you hate this color, or the client says, oh, make the red redder, the blue bluer, you can go in to your main component, it has to be your main component, and change the color, and then you'll notice that everything else changes it because they're just copycat. Now text is again for main components. If you change the text, then it'll change. But obviously buttons have different text on for different things. So that's why these copies are good to have, because once you change something on a copy, it doesn't change it on the other one. So, you know, this could be hello world, this could be checkout, and this could be place order. However, you can still go back to the main one. You could change the texting of it and it won't change the instances text. However, you could actually still change the color of here, and then it'll change the other ones. So that is the important thing of components, and you're not just held behind having just one element as a component. Here I have a navigation, which is filled by, you know, a rectangle for a brand, and then just a few navigation text-wise. And the idea here, I just want to give an example, is there's navigation over here, there's navigation, my main one. And if the client or someone, or you decide like, oh, I want these to be bigger in font size, so changing that will change this over here. But at the same time, if for some reason the navigation on this page is a little different, then I can change it without worrying it'll change on other pages. Sounds good. All right, that is my quick components. There is a lot of resources and materials about it and how to correctly use it for building out super complex design systems or UI kits and so forth. I'm just giving you the power and the knowledge of how to begin that journey. Okay, now the seventh thing you need to learn is how to manipulate typography. And this is also another huge issue, not a huge issue, a huge concept to learn that I am not going to teach, at least in this video. However, I did want to just kind of give a general rule that probably will work 70% of the time. You can see I have two things here, and aesthetically they're not too bad. Both of them are okay. However, one might prefer one over the other, just because one looks more spacious and easier to read than the other. So the left side is just like the default of what happens when you just insert text into Figma. You'll see on the right here that this line height is always on auto, and so it generally looks like this. It's kind of cramped, but it's still readable. However, in today's world with the web, people like to extend the line height a little bit more just to make it a little bit easier to read. And then of course you can see like the overall spacing between the title and a paragraph. It's a little odd, interesting. So the rule of thumb I thought of, and this might have just came from just so many years of like seeing patterns of how people do it, and so it's the 12, 24, and 1.5. So first, I'm going to explain the 1.5. 1.5 is basically the number you multiply the font size with to get your line height. And so in this instance, so on the right, there is the number 14. And what you want to do is clicking on your line height, you want to do 14 times, which is the asterisk, 1.5. And then it'll automatically set the line height to whatever that calculation becomes. So I'm going to do over here to 16. So 16 times 1.5 it becomes 24. So that's where the 1.5 comes from. Just simple math, multiply your font size, and then you get a decent looking line height for any text. For certain fonts and other type, you might use different numbers. So you could use like 1.25, 1.4, 1.3. That's how you relatively change line heights. But if you're stuck on like, okay, which one do I really use? Stick with 1.5. You'll be fine. So I'm gonna put 1.5 times font size, right? All right, the 12 rule. 12 rule is mainly the distance between your title and your paragraph. So you can see I have 18 here and move it up 6 pixels. This is what it is. And that's how it looks like there. Is it perfect? No. But is it better than this? Yep. Better than having it too far away? Maybe. It depends on what you want to do. But my general rule, if you're stuck on figuring this out, do 12. And 24 comes to the point is after any paragraph, your next paragraph or header should start 24 pixels after it. So I can see this title is 24 pixels after that. And then this is 18, so let's go to 12. And there you have it. That's how I do typography really quickly if you just want to make something out and about without worrying about specifics. All right. Cool. Half an hour. So that's basically the seven principles that I use every single day. Back and forth between pixel pushing, making groups, aligning, and these are all the tools that I use to create these little wireframes here. You can have fun with it. You can just see there's endless possibilities of what you can do. It's more of just how you want to create the rectangles and where you want to put them. And that's how you get to make, that's how you start web designing or designing in general. Just create rectangles, laying them out in certain ways, aligning them to each other so just you can see how it's centered. And that's all there is to it. So that is the quick and dirty masterclass. Once you go through all these 7 steps and practice them daily, you can do whatever you want and be crazy with it. I will figure out more topics to talk about in other future master classes, but this is it, man. Like, you can just learn this and now you're a designer. Go teach your designer friends something new or become a designer yourself and start making money. But that's all for now. Hope you enjoyed the video and take care.